What's going on? My name is Sean Eggleston. I'm a registered dietitian and I work with thousands of patients every single year dealing with a variety of diet related conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer, dementia, you name it. I've seen it all across the spectrum, all ages, genders, walks of life. And my channel is here to present you with good nutrition information that you can trust from a reputable source with quality tips that you can apply to your everyday life. Because I see people that struggle every single day with having a poor quality of life. And that's really what nutrition is about. Nutrition helps bring your quality of life up. And that brings me to our topic today, which is carb counting and diabetes. I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons why I don't recommend carbohydrate counting for diabetes or blood sugar control. Now, if this is more geared towards type 2 diabetics, but I imagine type 1 diabetics could benefit from this as well, it's just blood sugar management is a little bit more complicated with type 1 diabetes. But in any case, so carbohydrate counting basically just looks at the amount of carbs that you have per meal. Generally speaking, you want 45 to 60 carbs at breakfast, at lunch, and then again at dinner. And the thinking is that if your carbohydrate intake is consistent, your blood sugars will be better regulated because we know that carbohydrates raise your blood sugars. But the thing is, not all carbohydrates are created equal, and that's why doing this can be so difficult and often won't give you the results that you're looking for. I have 5 tips off screen here, so let's jump into this. The first reason is nobody follows it. I have never met anyone, and I've spoken with hundreds of people with diabetes, and not one of them has said, I count carbs. And none of them, especially the ones that have had high A1Cs and have dropped their A1C, have dropped their blood sugars, none of them have said the best technique that I can recommend is carb counting. It's just not the case. So people don't follow it. It's hard enough to change your diet, to radically shift what you're eating, to form new habits, to change your whole kitchen and your routine. And to have to count carbs on top of that, it just makes the process even more challenging. But maybe it's worth it. Let's take a look at these other 4 tips. It doesn't take into consideration the types of carbohydrates. So is it 45 grams from a can of soda? Or is it 45 grams from oatmeal? Or is it from beans? Is it from rice? Is it from chips? So what type of carb? We know that there's fiber is a type of carb, starches are carbs, sugar is a carb. Is it sugar from fruit? Is it added sugar? And that's where things get complicated. We don't distinguish between types of carbohydrates when we carbohydrate count. And that's not fair because a can of soda is going to raise your blood sugars much faster, much higher than a can of beans. So we really need to look at the types of carbs. And if you want to learn more about which carbs are best for diabetic control, in the description below, I'll leave a link to my video that's all about types of carbohydrates and the best ones for optimal blood sugar control. And you can also go to my website, seantherd.com, and under Learn, there's a variety of videos on diet and nutrition, specifically for diabetics as well. And of course, we know that beans, a lot of the carbohydrates in beans don't even get digested. They pass through to your large intestine. So looking at fiber, looking at beans, some of these carbs don't even get digested. So should we be counting those carbs or not? And that's where things get real messy. Number 3, carbs are not really the problem. Now, if you're having a bunch of sugar and added sugar and sodas and drinks and things like that, and refined carbohydrates, white flour, snack foods, junk foods, desserts, sure, those carbs are jacking up your blood sugars and definitely increasing our risk for diabetes. But the real issue, the real reason why people get diabetes is not because they eat too many carbs per se, it's that they eat too many calories. And when we have a higher net calorie intake than we get rid of, we gain weight. And it's that weight gain that can cause diabetes. Specifically, when we deposit some of that fat, not around our waist, our hips, our butt, our thighs, our arms, but when some of that fat gets deposited in our muscles and in our pancreas, that's what causes diabetes. So if we have a diet that's low in carbs, but it's too high in calories, we're going to increase our risk for getting diabetes and having bad blood sugar control. So the issue with carb counting is that it puts the blame on the carbs, and carbs are some of the healthiest foods. The problem is excess calorie intake, and for a lot of Americans, those extra calories are coming in the form of added fats, oils, dairy, and that fat is easily stored and easily converted at a very high percentage into our own body. So we need to look at the kind of fat that we're taking in, the types of carbs, and our overall calorie intake. Number 4, animal protein jacks up our insulin. Jacks up our insulin just like white sugar. We know that if you eat steak, protein requires insulin to be utilized and absorbed into the muscles. So the GLUT4 receptor doesn't just use insulin to bind sugar and transport that into the cell. It also binds amino acids. So we need to keep in mind that animal protein can jack up our insulin just as much as refined carbohydrates. And that kind of ties in with point number 5, and that's that people are focusing, when people steer away from carbs, now they're focusing on fats, now they're focusing on proteins. And the problem with that is that proteins and fats, these are very calorie-dense foods. They often don't have as many vitamins and minerals as carbohydrate-based foods. And this is really touching on my topic of nutrient density and calorie density, which I have a video on my website. Again, SeanTheRD.com. Learn Heart Healthy Nutrition goes over nutrient density. And so when we look at the healthiest populations around the world that have the lowest rates of diabetes, they have a diet that's centered around whole plant foods. And we know that carbs, with the exception of milk, carbs only come from plant foods. So the healthiest diets around the world are ones that are actually centered around carbohydrates. And so when we carbohydrate count, now people might be more interested in counting or following the fats and the proteins. And this is actually steering them away from heart healthy plant foods. So carbohydrate counting is leading people in a completely wrong direction. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, you can post and leave comments down below or on my webpage. There's a contact me section. You're more than welcome to send me an email and I'll be happy to answer any questions or concerns that you may have or other suggestions for videos that you might find helpful. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.